All right, welcome back. I am here to answer more of your questions, and we are going to dive in. I'll always believe having her come back was the original plan, but seeing as how it's been almost 10 years, maybe they decided that it just wasn't worth it and nobody would really care anymore. I can't fathom why they would wait this long. They've already lost a lot of viewers because of her death and Sever's other characters' deaths. This long game isn't exactly smart business-wise. Well, maybe not. I mean, first of all, remember that they really didn't have a choice. I mean, if AMC was saying that he could do his own material, meaning Beth and Daryl, but he had to get through the comics book stuff first, then they really didn't have a choice. They had to push it, So it's not a matter of they just kind of decided to do this. It was something that the studio kind of demanded. And in terms of you guys got to stop getting hung up on how long it's been. Remember that they brought Morales back after 8 years just to kill him off. And very few people even remembered Morales at that point. He was nowhere near as big a character as Beth was. So, yeah, I mean, I think you got to stop worrying about the timeline. We've talked about how it probably was supposed to be earlier, but it kept getting pushed because of COVID and because of other complications. But the time, unless something happens where, AMC goes under or, one of the actors dies or something like it doesn't, unless there's something massive like that they can't come back from, it's not changing the plan. From what we can tell, the plan's on track from what it always was. So, yeah, I mean, they did lose viewers over her death. I actually think they lost more after Glenn and Abraham's deaths because people just couldn't deal with the macabre nature of that. But you guys also got to realize that The Walking Dead, especially Daryl Dixon and, more recently The Ones Who Live, which is Rick and Michonne, they're still the most in-demand show in the world. There were times when Game of Thrones was still on that Game of Thrones outdid them sometimes for viewership, but Game of Thrones is over. They're doing House of the Dragon now, but, this is the most long-running show that is still really at the top of the viewership. And I know that that's hard to gauge because there's so many streaming platforms now and the viewership is always split up. And when people watch it, not everybody watches it live. Sometimes they watch it later during the week and all of that. But you have to understand their business is not hurting, like not even a little bit. And they know that people care because they know about us. They know that, number one, we have a lot of evidence that they know about TD, that they read what we post, that they have a lot of idea about who we are. They're just being hush-hush because they don't want to confirm anything. But even if they didn't know about us, because we are a small corner of the fandom, they know that people care about Daryl and they know that people care about his love life. So, you could argue that alone doesn't prove that Beth will come back. It just proves that they want to give him a love interest. But the point is, whether it's Beth or someone else, people are definitely going to care. It's a big deal. So, yeah, I think that it just feels kind of bleak because it's been a long time. But most of these arguments we can debunk with quite a lot of evidence. So just try not to be so worried about it. And I know it takes a long time and we're still waiting, but we're very hopeful for Daryl Dixon season 2. One thing I forgot about that I just remembered today out of nowhere. Right after Beth wakes up in the hospital, Dr. Edwards says, "Your wrist was fractured and you suffered a superficial head wound." I gasped. Yeah, so that was definitely felt like a foreshadow. Everything that they say in that scene is really suspicious. I mean, the whole scene itself. So I would start with the fact that the door was locked. Why was the door locked? They didn't seem to be locking anybody else's door at Grady, and we weren't given an explanation for why the door was locked. I think that we were supposed to believe that maybe it's just because they didn't know who she was and she was new and they didn't know if she was dangerous, but why would that actually be a problem? They could have put a guard inside her door to let people know when she was awake, and all of the officers have guns, like she wasn't going to take down one of those officers when she woke up. And I think the reason for that has to do with the bite theory. I think that they didn't know if she was going to wake up as a human or if she was going to reanimate as a walker, so they kept the door locked so that she couldn't, do what Patrick did at the prison and just sort of wander out and start attacking people if she did turn. And so when they opened the door, go back and watch that scene again. I mean, not only is everything they say suspicious, I do think the superficial head wound was a foreshadow. I think the fractured wrist is a lie, and that I guess her wrist could also be fractured, but I think that it was, most of us think that her cast was covering up a bite mark. But there's a part where they ask her if she remembers her name. And Dawn really studies her in this weird way. Like, she kind of narrows her eyes and is studying her. And I've always thought that was really, really suspicious, because it's like Dawn's trying to figure out what Beth knows or what Beth remembers. And if you remember back in season 3 with Andrea and Milton, they were conducting experiments to see if after somebody was bitten and died and turned, if they would remember things from their life when they were alive, their children, or they had pictures, things like that. And those didn't go particularly well, but I think she's wondering if Beth has any memory of her life because she was bitten, and so it's just really interesting to watch that. And the whole thing is just super, super suspicious. So yeah, but I agree. I think the head wound thing was definitely a foreshadow. And they don't really address it again. We don't hear anything else about Beth's head wound. But here's the other thing that's super suspicious, and you would actually have to know something about medical stuff in order to get this, but people have zoomed in on her IV and realized that they were giving her heparin. That's what's in the IV that she has in her arm when she wakes up. Now, guys, it does not make even the tiniest bit of sense medically that they would give her that if she had a head wound. Literally, the problem with head wounds is that you can bleed out inside your head. So heparin is a blood thinner, and they would not give anybody with a head wound of any kind a blood thinner, because it might end up leading to bleeding on the brain. And they would never, ever, ever. In fact, it's like it's a counterindication for medical people to give anyone with a head wound any kind of blood thinner, because if they do have a brain bleed, they want the blood to clot in their brain so that it does not kill them, right? So there's no way they would be giving her heparin for a superficial head wound. Now, on the flip side, we do know that in the TWD universe, Walker blood congeals. It's much thicker, more, you could use the word viscous, but it's more than that. It congeals to the point where it's like Jell-O. Okay, and that's how they can tell the difference between Walker blood and human blood. And that would make sense if they were worried about her blood congealing, that they would give her heparin. So yeah, lots and lots of suspicious things there. And I do think that it's a lot of clues toward what happened in the past, meaning she was probably bitten, and what's going to happen in the future, which is that she's going to get shot, but she's going to wake up. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for sending that in. That's a really great observation. All right, next one. The scars on Beth's face bug the hell out of me. Why give this character scars if you're just going to kill her off? And it can't be something simplistic and stupid as they make her look more badass. No, Emily even referred to them as scars. Baby, they weren't scars yet. And it makes me think about the whole shaved head idea. EK was like, well, if you're going to kill me off, don't make me shave my head because I need to get another job. Technically, they did kill her off, and she was done filming season 5 because she was filming a ton of stuff for the future. Then after she wraps, she can get work until she has to come back. I am concerned if we're correct, then that means Beth might have had to have surgery, which would entail shaving her head. Maybe, I'm not a doctor. Yeah, I've thought of that before. I guess I didn't think of it so much in a surgical sense, but just that the shaved head might be a clue towards something, because that was something that Norman talked about. I think they both did in interviews, and the fact that they're both telling the same story to the people who are interviewing for the comic book type websites is really suspicious. We know that they have talking points, and I think that was something that was put together. So, back at the time, because that came out actually after season 4, and so that we didn't really, at the end of season 4, no one even knew if she was alive. She just got taken from Daryl. And so we had no idea what was going to happen yet. And it was long before the trailer for season 5 came out and all of that. So yeah, it might have been a foreshadow of a surgery, or even just the fact that even just a head injury, because he said she was going to have to shave her head. Where does that come from? It's kind of random. So yeah, I agree. I think that very well could be a clue to something. And yeah, you're right about the scars. They hadn't actually scarred over yet, but we knew they would, because the main reason people even knew that is because they were Andrea's scars. And so that's super suspicious. Andrea's arcs were broken up and given to several people, including Michonne got a few of them. I think Carol got 1 or 2 of them. But yeah, why give her scars, Andrea's scars, only to kill her off? That doesn't make a ton of sense. And the other thing I will say, maybe it's neither here nor there, but there aren't very many people on the show that have scars on their face. You could argue Carl when he lost his eye, although that was the loss of an eye. It wasn't just a scar. And then, of course, Daryl does. And that scar is very wrapped up in Leah, who was a proxy of Beth, and in Dog, as in the serious symbolism. And it seems to me that they're almost matching the two of them up. They're the two with scars on their faces. Because, very easily Michonne or Rick or Maggie or whoever could have a scar on their face from everything they've gone through, but they specifically have not put noticeable scars on their faces. And, a lot of times they get injuries. I mean, more than once, Rick has had an injury that mirrored Beth's, but it always heals, and he doesn't have a scar from it. So it just seems very, very purposeful to me that they put scars on her face, and then specifically during the Leah storyline, suddenly Daryl has a scar on his face. It's in a different spot than hers, but they're both going to be like the two characters who have scars on their faces, and they're putting them together. It just makes sense to me that it's kind of symmetrical that way. So yeah. Anyway, I really liked everything you said here, and I agree. I think that's very true. And you're right that she very well, let's put it this way, if they were trying, I don't know, if they were trying to dig a bullet out of her head, sorry if that sounds a little graphic, then they would definitely be doing surgery on her head, which means they would shave her head. But we did see the bullet come out. Because it's a through and through, I kind of don't think they're going to need to do surgery for that. I don't know, but like you said, we don't know, because we don't know exactly what injury they're going with for her. It could be one of many things. And so, yeah, we're basically just going to have to wait and see. But I would say especially, you could see it either way. If she does have surgery, then obviously it was a clue. If she doesn't have surgery, it's also kind of a clue, because why would they say that if she wasn't going to have surgery? That just means they were hinting at something, symbolically. So, yeah, either way, it's kind of sus. All right, next one. We know Beth has a lot of comic Andrea parallels. I was just wondering if you thought that they had that in the script originally or changed it after they killed Andrea. They thought about having Axel kill Beth in season 3 but didn't go along with it. Was that when they decided she would become an Andrea proxy? I think that Gimple decided that when he took over at the end of season 3. And the reason I say that is because and this is what we know, that we always say that he became the showrunner in season 4, but really he became the showrunner at the very end of season 3, and we know that he rewrote episode 16, the finale of season 3. Like, they completely rewrote it and reshot it, because apparently Andrea's death really sucked, and that always kind of makes me laugh, because everybody kind of thought her death, the one that we saw, sucked. So I can't imagine how much worse it must have been that Gimple actually scrapped the whole thing and was like, okay, we're reshooting this, But he wanted to give her a better death than apparently she had been given in the original script. So just think about that. Gimple redid the final episode of season 3. He took over just in time at the end of filming so that they could get it done. And that means at that point, he was already planning season 4. So I think he already had the plan in mind at that point. I think it was something he'd wanted to do for a long time. He just didn't know if he would be able to. And when he took over at the end of season 3, that's when he could put it into, implement it and actually create it, what he wanted. And the other thing to remember is that at the end, the final episode of season 3, Beth is also wearing Andrea's clothing from the comic book, like her beanie and her jacket. So I think him putting Beth's clothes on her there shows that was when he decided she was going to get some Andrea storylines. And I honestly think that he had it figured out then. I think he already, and maybe, I will say that maybe at this point the actors may not have known, but I think Gimple already knew when he took over in season 3 that what he was going to do, that she was going to get shot and go away, that she was going to be Daryl's love interest. I think he knew all of it already. People do point to the fact that there's a couple of hints in season 3 at Beth and Daryl being a couple, and they're very subtle. So if they hadn't decided to go that way, it probably wouldn't have bothered anyone. One of them is one of my favorite scenes in 301 when they're sitting around the campfire at the prison and Beth starts singing. Now this is I'm gonna kind of get up on my soapbox here. This is really interesting, the way that this played out, and just because I'm a writer myself, I know the way that the writers think, right? So first in that part we had Daryl and Carol up on top of the bus, and that's when she says the "want to screw around" line, and then laughs, and then he laughs and says stop or whatever. That scene, as I've really beating this to death. That scene was them closing the door on Daryl and Carol being a romantic thing, okay? Because literally she says that and laughs. And we do get a moment there where he looks at her as though he's considering it. And I know that that's not what Bethyl fans like to hear, but it's like, of course he's going to think it's possible. It doesn't mean he's in love with Carol. It's just, is this something that possibly could happen someday, But then the fact that she laughed about it, then he kind of went, oh, okay. And that's just clear where she's at on it, and he's fine with that. You know what I mean? So that was the writers putting in a scene where they were, maybe they even considered using Carol as Daryl's love interest at some point early in the show, but that was them closing the door on it and saying, no, this is just going to be a friendship. And it is literally, guys, like 2 seconds later, after they jump down off the bus, that Beth is singing and Daryl is staring at her. Okay, so that is the writers, number one, closing the door on Daryl and Carol being romantic and then saying, no, this is what we're going to do. Look at who he's staring at. Okay, so that's number one. Then we have the part where Daryl leaves with Merle and Beth is talking to Carol about him, and lots of people have talked about how her dialogue there shows that she really likes him and is kind of crushing on him a little bit. So there's that. And I would even argue later on, it's not too long after that, I think it's just the next episode, where she sings again in the prison, and it's right before, I want to say it's episode 11, because 12 is where Michonne and Rick go and find Morgan in Clear, and it's right before that she's singing again in the prison the Tom Waits song, and Daryl's staring at her again, and that's where Merle comes out and stares at her as well. And again, one of my favorite scenes. But anyway, so there's hints that they were putting in that they might have been going that way anyway, and we don't know if Gimple put those in or if they let anybody put those in, or we don't know the details of who was doing what. We just know that behind the scenes of season 3 was really a mess, and that's why the showrunner ended up getting fired and Gimple took over. So, sorry, that was like a long rant that went off topic, but I think that, I don't know that it was necessarily when they decided to not have Axel kill her. It might have been, but at least by the time Gimple took over in 316, I think he knew at that point, because he put her in Andrea's costuming, And then, of course, I mean, even though it felt like a long time for us, because it would have been several months wait before the 4th season started, it's the very next episode that we get the Bethyl hug. And that's really, really telling that that's very much where he knew he was going with it. So hopefully that helps. Where are we at here? Oh, okay. So we need to stop for today. Sometimes I get rambling and don't realize how long I'm running, but I'll call it there for today, and I'll be back tomorrow to answer more questions. Everyone have a lovely day.